Olivia lived in a quiet neighborhood in Portland. It's the kind of place where everyone minded their own business and the days slipped by in silence. She was 38, a graphic designer who worked from home. And her life had settled into a routine so steady, it sometimes felt like she was simply existing rather than living. She had a few close friends. She kept her garden neat, and she spent her evenings with books and movies. It wasn't a bad life, but it was predictable. And lately, she felt the weight of that predictability pressing down on her. Then Daniel moved. In next door, it happened on a windy afternoon in early spring. Olivia was trimming roses when a moving truck pulled up in front of the empty house beside hers. She had seen the for sale sign come down a week earlier, but hadn't expected the new owner to arrive so soon. A tall young man stepped out of the truck, his hair ruffled, his movements quick and confident. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe 10 or 12 years younger than her, and he had the kind of presence that instantly drew attention. Olivia tried not to stare, but when he caught her eye, he smiled warmly and waved. Something about that smile made her stomach tighten. She lifted her hand in a polite return, telling herself it was just a neighborly gesture. Nothing more. By evening, most of his boxes were still stacked in the driveway, and Olivia noticed him struggling to carry a heavy one. Against her own cautious nature, she crossed over and offered help. He laughed, a sound that was both light and disarming, and said, "Thanks, but I think this box is bigger than me." Together they hauled it inside, and for the first time, Olivia heard his name, Daniel. The conversation that followed was casual, but Olivia felt a strange pull. He told her he had moved from Seattle, that he wanted a fresh start after leaving a long-term relationship behind. Olivia shared only a little about herself, careful not to reveal too much, yet his ease made it hard to keep walls up. He seemed to open, to willing to connect, and she wasn't sure if that unsettled her or intrigued her. Over the next few days, Daniel's presence became impossible to ignore. He knocked on her door to ask if she had a toolbox, waved whenever he saw her in the yard, and even fixed her garden gate without being asked. He was helpful, yes, but also persistent in ways that left her uneasy. Olivia had always valued her space, and Daniel seemed determined to step into it. One evening, while Olivia was carrying grocery bags from her car, Daniel appeared out of nowhere and insisted on helping. She wanted to refuse, but his insistence was gentle yet firm. And soon he was placing bags on her kitchen counter like he belonged there. His energy filled her small kitchen, and she couldn't help noticing how alive it felt. Still, she reminded herself he was younger, a neighbor, and someone she barely knew. The thought of getting close was unwise. But Daniel didn't seem to see boundaries the way she did. He lingered, asked questions about her work, and even made her laugh with a story about his disastrous attempt at cooking. It was all innocent, but Olivia could feel something else underneath him. Intensity in the way he looked at her. A weight in his pauses that said more than words. That night, as she sat alone on her couch, she replayed their conversation in her mind. It had been years since anyone made her feel noticed in that way, and the realization unsettled her. She wanted to dismiss it, to pretend it was just neighborly friendliness. But deep down, she knew it was something stronger. The weather turned rainy the next week. One evening, Olivia was curled up with a book when a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, his shirt damp, his expression serious. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. His eyes held a storm she didn't understand. "I need to talk," he said, his voice low but urgent. Olivia's heart skipped. She wanted to ask why, to tell him this wasn't the time. But the way he stood, their wet hair dripping, jaw clenched, made her step aside without thinking. He entered quietly, the air between them heavy, as she closed the door. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that her calm, ordinary life was about to change in ways she wasn't prepared for. Daniel was too young, too bold, and already too close. And yet, against all reason, part of her wanted to hear whatever it was he had to say. The rain tapped harder against the windows, the room thick with silence. Olivia folded her arms, steadying herself. She didn't know if Daniel's story would draw her in or push her away. But she knew one thing for certain. This night was the beginning of something she couldn't ignore. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, and the sound filled the silence between Olivia and Daniel. He sat across from her at the small dining table, his damp shirt clinging to him, his eyes fixed on the wood grain, as if searching for courage. Olivia waited, unsure what could be so urgent. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice quiet but unshaken. "I left Seattle because I couldn't stay there anymore. I thought I had it all. Someone I loved, plans for the future, everything lined up, but it fell apart. She betrayed me, and I realized I was living in a place full of lies." Olivia shifted in her chair. She hadn't expected this. He was young, strong, and confident on the outside, but beneath that there was a wound still raw. He went on, explaining how the breakup had shattered his trust, how moving to Portland was his way of starting over. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was heavy. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," Daniel admitted, finally lifting his gaze to hers. "But with you it feels different. Safer." Olivia felt a rush of sympathy she hadn't planned on. She knew heartbreak. She knew what it was like to hide it under layers of routine and silence. His honesty pierced through her defenses. Though she told herself to keep distance, something in her heart leaned closer. "You don't even know me," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "Maybe not fully. But I want to." The directness of his words unsettled her. She was nearly 40, and he was barely into his late 20s. Their lives were in different chapters. She could already hear the whispers if neighbors caught even a hint of this closeness. Yet the way he looked at her steady, unblinking, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Trying to calm herself, Olivia stood and poured 2 cups of tea. She needed the distance, even if only across the room. But when she handed him his cup, his fingers brushed hers, slow and deliberate. The touch lasted only a second, yet it sent a spark racing up her arm. She pulled back quickly, her breath unsteady. "This is wrong," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression steady but tender. "Then why does it feel so right?" The question hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Olivia looked away, staring at the rain-streaked window. She wanted to tell him he was being reckless, that they were neighbors and nothing more. But the words caught in her throat. The clock ticked in the background, marking the seconds of silence. Daniel sipped his tea and spoke again, his voice lower, calmer. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I can't ignore this. Being around you, talking to you, it feels real in a way nothing else has lately." Olivia's heart pounded. She knew she should end this, set a clear boundary, and send him home. But she couldn't ignore how his presence filled the emptiness she had been carrying for so long. His laughter, his energy, even his pain, they had already become part of her quiet days. She stood and walked toward the window, trying to steady her thoughts. "You're too young for me," she said finally, her voice firmer than she felt. "People wouldn't understand. It's not simple." Daniel rose too, standing a few steps behind her. "Nothing about life is simple," he replied. "But maybe that's why this matters." His words sent a shiver through her. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. They held no mockery, no carelessness, only a depth that made her breath catch. She wanted to tell him to leave, to protect herself. But the honesty in his gaze pinned her in place. The rain outside grew heavier, as if echoing the storm inside her. Olivia felt torn between reason and desire, between safety and risk. Every part of her logical mind screamed to keep her distance. But another part, the one that had been silent for years, whispered that she had found something she couldn't ignore. Daniel took a small step closer, careful not to invade her space. "I'm not asking for promises," he said. "I just want you to know how I feel. I don't expect you to feel the same." But I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Olivia's lips parted, but no words came out. The truth was, she did feel something powerful and unsettling. She didn't want to admit it, not to him, not even to herself. But denying it felt like denying the air she breathed. She forced a shaky smile, trying to mask her turmoil. "You should go home," she said finally. "It's late." Daniel hesitated, studying her as if searching for the truth beneath her words. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, "But Olivia." His voice softened. "You don't have to pretend you don't feel it. Not with me." With that, he left quietly. Closing the door behind him, Olivia pressed her hands against her chest, her heart racing faster than it had in years. She stood there in the quiet house, listening to the fading sound of the rain. His words echoed in her mind, refusing to be silenced. She knew she should push him away, draw a clear line, and protect herself. But deep inside, she also knew something had already shifted. Daniel wasn't just her neighbor anymore. He was the storm breaking through the stillness of her life. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the pull. The days after Daniel's late-night visit were restless for Olivia. She kept busy with work, errands, and endless small tasks. But no matter how much she tried, she couldn't push him from her thoughts. Every corner of her house reminded her of him: her kitchen, where he carried her groceries, the garden gate, fixed by his hands, even her window, where she had caught him looking at her as if she were more than just a neighbor. She told herself to stay away. But Daniel didn't make that easy. He always seemed to appear, not forcefully, but with a persistence that slipped into her life like sunlight through curtains. One morning, she stepped outside to find him mowing her lawn. When she asked why, he only shrugged and said it looked like it needed it. Another evening, she found fresh flowers left on her porch. No note, but no mystery either. He was weaving himself into her world, and she didn't know how to stop it. At first, she tried to ignore him. She kept her answers short, avoided eye contact, and shut her door quickly whenever he came by. But Daniel had a way of disarming her with simple kindness. He didn't push with words. He pushed with presence. A knock when it rained too hard, an offer of coffee when he brewed too much, a smile that stayed with her long after he walked away, and then there were their conversations, brief, unexpected, yet strangely meaningful. They would stand at the fence between their houses and talk about ordinary things: books, music, the small quirks of daily life. Yet somehow, those talks reached deeper, brushing against feelings Olivia thought she had buried. One evening, as the sun sank low, painting the sky in soft orange, Daniel found her sitting on her porch. He leaned against the railing, casual but intent. After a pause, he said quietly, "I think about you more than I should." Olivia froze. She had been waiting for him to say it, though she didn't want to admit it. Her heart pounded as she forced a smile. "Daniel, you're young. This is just a distraction for you." He shook his head. "No, it's not. I've been through distractions. This isn't one of them. You're in my head all the time. I can't let it go." She felt her chest tighten, every wall she had built threatening to collapse. She wanted to scold him, to remind him of their differences, to end it before it grew more dangerous. But the truth betrayed her. She had been waiting for those words, even if she didn't want to. Her voice trembled as she replied, "You don't know what you're asking for. My life isn't simple." Daniel stepped closer. Not too close, but enough that she could feel the pull of him. His tone was steady. "Neither is mine. But maybe together, it could be something worth the risk." Olivia turned away, staring at the shadows stretching across the street. Every part of her knew this was wrong. Neighbors would talk. Friends would question. The age gap would always hang between them. Yet her heart whispered a different truth. He had awakened something inside her, something too powerful to ignore. That night, she lay in bed replaying his words. She remembered his eyes, the way they held no hesitation, only sincerity. She had not felt wanted, truly wanted, in years. And now, she couldn't deny the longing growing in her. The following week, Daniel found excuses to be near again. He invited her to try a new cafe. He showed up with a book he thought she would like. He asked about her work, not out of politeness, but genuine curiosity. Each gesture chipped away at her resistance. Olivia began to laugh again, real laughter, the kind she thought she had lost. She found herself waiting for his knocks on the door, watching for him through the window, listening for his footsteps in the yard. It scared her, this dependence, but it also thrilled her. Still, the fear lingered. One afternoon, when Daniel caught her staring too long, She pulled back and said sharply, "This can't happen. Do you understand? It's impossible." He looked at her quietly, his expression unreadable. Then he asked, "If it's impossible, why do you look at me like that?" Her breath caught. She had no answer. The days blurred together, each one binding them tighter in a web of unspoken feelings. Olivia's mind fought to keep control, but her heart betrayed her again and again. His nearness was a constant reminder of what she wanted but didn't dare reach for. Then, one evening, the storm inside her broke. She was watering her plants when Daniel walked over, hands in his pockets. He looked unusually serious. "I can't keep pretending," he said. "I feel something for you, Olivia, and I know you feel it too." She dropped the watering can, the sound echoing in the quiet yard. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied. "I'm telling the truth." The air between them grew heavy, thick with everything unspoken. Olivia felt the pull like gravity, stronger than her fear, stronger than reason. She wanted to step away, but her feet refused to move. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's gaze was steady, his presence overwhelming yet tender. Olivia's heart raced, torn between surrender and escape. Finally, she forced herself to speak, her voice breaking. "You're in places I swore no one would ever reach again, and it terrifies me." Daniel's reply was simple but powerful. "Then let it terrify you. Sometimes the best things do." The words struck her like a lightning bolt. She turned and fled into the house, closing the door behind her, pressing her back against it as tears filled her eyes. She didn't know whether to feel alive or broken. But she knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. Daniel had reached the depths of her heart, and she could no longer pretend otherwise. The night after Olivia closed her door on Daniel, sleep refused to come. She tossed and turned, her thoughts spinning in endless circles. Every word he had spoken replayed in her mind, each one cutting through her defenses. She tried to convince herself it was only a phase, a passing attraction, nothing real. But deep down, she knew the truth. Daniel had shaken her life in ways she could no longer deny. For days she avoided him. She kept her curtains drawn, hurried inside whenever she heard his footsteps, and buried herself in work. But even in his absence, his presence lingered. She caught herself looking at the house next door, half hoping to see him, half dreading it. Her heart was restless, caught between reason and desire. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the neighborhood grew quiet, Olivia stood by her window. She told herself she was only checking the weather, but her eyes drifted to Daniel's house. The light in his living room was on, and a shadow moved across the curtain. For a long time, she stood frozen, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. And then, as if he felt her gaze, Daniel stepped outside. He looked across the narrow space between their homes and saw her at the window. He didn't wave, didn't speak. He just stood there, watching her with an expression that held both patience and determination. Olivia's breath caught. She could have turned away, could have closed the blinds, but she didn't. Something in his stillness pulled her closer to the moment. Closer to him, minutes passed in silence, but the air between them was thick with meaning. Finally, Olivia opened her door. She didn't know what she was going to say, only that she couldn't keep hiding. When she stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around her. Daniel was already moving toward her, his steps slow, his eyes never leaving hers. They met halfway between the two houses, in the quiet shadows of their yards. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You forced your way into my life, Daniel. Into places I didn't think anyone could reach." She paused, swallowing hard. "And now, I don't know how to let you go." Daniel's expression softened, but his voice was steady. "Then don't." Olivia shook her head, fighting the fear rising in her chest. "It isn't that simple. People will talk. They'll say it's wrong. They'll never understand." He stepped closer, not enough to overwhelm her, but enough to make his presence impossible to ignore. "Maybe they won't understand. But I don't care about them. I care about you. And I know what I feel is real." Her heart ached at his certainty. She had spent years building walls, convincing herself that safety was better than risk, that silence was easier than vulnerability. Yet here was Daniel, tearing down those walls with words so simple they left her defenseless. The night grew colder, but Olivia felt heat rising inside her, the kind that came from truths too heavy to keep buried. She wanted to deny him again, to protect herself, but when she met his eyes, all she saw was sincerity. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you're too big a part of me already, and I'm afraid of what that means." He reached out, not to touch her, but to hold the air between them. His tone was quiet, almost pleading. "Don't be afraid of feeling alive. Don't be afraid of something that could change everything for the better." Tears welled in her eyes. She hated that he could see her so vulnerable, but she also felt lighter speaking the truth she had tried to bury. "You've broken into places I thought were locked forever," she admitted. "I don't know if I can survive losing you now." Daniel shook his head. "Then don't think about losing me. Think about what we could have if you let yourself trust it." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Olivia felt her fear battling her longing, each pulling her in opposite directions. She had always chosen safety, always chosen the path with the least risk. But as Daniel stood before her, eyes steady, words echoing in her heart, she realized safety had also meant emptiness. The choice wasn't clear, but it was undeniable. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the sea.